another episode of the Nuclear Medicine, Molecular Medicine podcast, the world's longest running medical podcast. And here, I'm here in Vancouver at the site of Nuclear Medicine, and we've got scientists from Siemens, who manufacturer of all nuclear medicine imaging instruments. And one of their, and in their PET scans, they use lutetium as the detectors for picking up the gamma rays. Reza here has got a clever use of that detector in other ways than just picking up gamma rays from our positons. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you work and stuff?
All right. Thanks for having me. So my name is Reza Teimoorisichani. I am a research scientist with Siemens. A little bit about myself. I actually did my PhD here in Canada, and I graduated 3 years ago. I joined Siemens as a research scientist, and ever since I joined, we've been actually working on a lot of CT-less PET scans in the hope that we can provide this option that if somebody wanted to do quantitative PET scan without performing a CT, that option is provided.
Let's talk a bit about the need for that. I mean, every PET scanner has really got a CT on it these days. No one doesn't buy a PET scanner without a CT. But we've now got whole body PET scanners, and in order to do a CT, even for attenuation correction, you've got to expose the whole body to radiation, right? Not just the. So that's not necessarily insignificant about radiation. So there's a good reason to want to do it that way. So carry on.
So that's a good point. Right now, we have been actually focusing this research on long axial field of view scanners, specifically the Siemens Biograph Quadra. And that scanner obviously comes with a CT scanner. So the option of CT is always available. And practically speaking, CT is always being done anyway. However, there are cases where if we can, we ideally wanted to not perform the CT just for the sake of radiation. And this is specifically important in pediatric studies or in cases where we already have a prior CT for that patient, and this CT, the new one, is only going to be acquired by attenuation and scatter correction of the data.
Right, well, the other reason is if you've got a whole body scanner, one of the reasons for doing it is to reduce the radiation dose that you're going to give healthy people or healthy controls for the scans. And because that whole body scan is way more sensitive than a traditional one, so you want to inject less, you can inject less radiation. If you want to reduce the radiation dose for doing healthy controls, particularly healthy controls in children, right, then reducing the radiation dose without doing the CT makes sense, right?
Exactly. That's a great point, because if you want to actually reduce the patient dose to a reasonable level, and yet you're doing the CT, so you're kind of making the low dose PET scan irrelevant, because you're still doing the CT and the patient is actually receiving a significant amount of dose for the attenuation correction that is not like the CT. So saving the CT here is actually going to help quite a bit. And then the approach that we have, we need to keep that in mind, that we're actually using the background radiation that is coming from radioisotope lutetium-176. Now the patient is receiving the dose the moment that the patient gets into the gantry of the PET scanner, because lutetium, there is a decay of the lutetium-176 in LSO or in LSO-based scanner, there's LSO and YSO. So the patient is going to receive this radiation, whether we use it or not, that's up to us. So we had this idea that, hey, the patient is receiving it, plus the patient is actually receiving this radiation exactly at the same time that the PET acquisition is being done. So unlike CT, where we have sequential acquisition of the PET data and the CT, this is truly simultaneous acquisition of the transmission and the emission data.
Right, and if you have one of the things that you've got in Siemens PET scanners, less than the newer ones, is the ability to do quality control using the radiation from the system. Yeah, no, I actually use that on my PET scanner at work. So and that works quite well. I just set it up overnight, but it takes a while. But it doesn't matter if you do it overnight, right?
Yeah.
And it does my quality control every night. And that's certainly a useful use of that radiation.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we've been thinking about this. That hey, this radiation exists. You're right. It's a relatively low flux radiation, so whatever you want it to do, it is going to take a while. However, it's a waste if you don't choose it. It's a perfect option. So there's actually quite a range of things that people are thinking about doing it. I know that it's not only Siemens. I know that there is quite a few other academic groups that have been focusing on this. There is motion tracking that people have been looking into. So there are actually some usage that people are thinking about doing about using this background radiation, and I think there is legitimate reason for that.
Right now, what's the energy of this background radiation?
So there are two photons that are particularly of interest to us. One is the 200 keV, the other one is the 300 keV.
Right.
The 300 keV, because it has a relatively higher energy than the 200, it has less self-absorption within the detector. It has more flux in it. A lot of research has been focused on the 300 keV. But when I say 300, to be exact, this is 307 keV. But we have been using both the 200 and the 300.
Right, and you look at the difference to help you do it. Do you?
No, we don't look at the difference. In fact, we assume that the 200 and the 300 are going to give you two different realizations for this subject. Then we actually combine the realization to reduce noise.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's a low flux.
Because it's
you need everybody captured.
Exactly. Yes.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a pretty clever way to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm thinking, hold on, this is there aren't any collimators in a PET scanner. How does this work?
Oh, okay. I should be clear that you're right. There are no collimators. These are not actually singles that we acquire. These are still coincidences. Now, this might be a little bit confusing because there is no 511, there is no positive here. But what is that if you look at the decay scheme of lutetium-176, what happens is that in the beginning, what we have is a beta minus decay.
Yes.
That beta minus decay is actually going to trigger the CFD. And once the 200 or the 300 photon is detected on the other side of the scan, this is going to...
So it's a coincidence between a beta minus and a gamma.
Yeah.
Oh, how clever.
Yeah, so the coincidence is actually coming, but it's just not from 511.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, but we need to bear in mind that in order to capture this, we need to open up the energy window, because now we're talking about a very different energy window than the clinical 400 to, say, 600 keV.
So what's the energy of the beta minus?
You don't know, because the beta minus actually has a spectrum of energy.
Right.
So it's not, you don't know what energy is actually going to be deposited in the crystal from the beta minus, and it doesn't matter, because so basically getting the event requires a little bit of a thinking that you really wanted to focus on the energy of the second event in order to distinguish LSO background radiation.
Gotcha.
The first event that is going to trigger the CFD, you really don't know how much energy is going to deposit.
Right.
So we just define a rather wide window and say that, hey, whatever that is within this window, it could be a beta minus, but really what it's going to determine is the time of flight of the window and the energy for the second event.
That's way cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's
right. Does it produce an image?
It does. So we've actually published a couple of papers on this, and we've shown some of the images. It actually does produce a reasonably low image. It's nowhere close to a CT attenuation. It's a very low flux photon data.
Sure, but we did used to use those rod sources in the old PET scanners for doing those, and if you've ever seen a map of those, they're pretty ordinary.
That's true, but it's still a rotating rod source actually has quite a bit of a higher flux than the background.
Sure, sure.
Nevertheless, we've actually looked at the patient data set that we got from a long axial field of view quadrant,
Yeah.
and they just not terribly bad.
Okay.
We like them at least as a starting point for a joint reconstruction. We still think that they have some very valuable information in them.
Okay. Do you combine this at all with? I mean, we have seen people trying to do attenuation correction without a CT using a PET alone, and looking at attenuation in that and working at a pseudo CT. In fact, that presented in this meeting.
That's true.
Could you combine the two to make an even better job of it?
I think that's a great idea. In fact, we have an ongoing research about this as well. There is quite a big range of AI-related pseudo-CT generation algorithms. And we also believe that perhaps the best option is to have a combination of various techniques where pseudo-CT is generated perhaps by AI, but something like the LSO combined with MLA or MLA-CF is going to improve or personalize those nuances. So things of that nature, I think, is something that in practice is probably going to give us the best results rather than using only LSO or rather than using only an AI-based method.
Well, I guess what you could do, I mean, we also know that they do these sort of things when they're trying to use MR for attenuation correction. It's not perfect either, right? So it works most of the time, but there's that 5% of the time that it doesn't work particularly well, and the same with the AI trying to get that working. I don't know, and I guess the same is going to apply to this method. There's going to be a 5%. What you don't want is that 5% to overlap, right?
Exactly.
But if it did, what you should be able to do, what you'd hope you'd be able to do, maybe is trigger, say, hey, we haven't got a good attenuation map here, let's do a CT after we've finished.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good approach, right?
That would be a good approach for sure, yeah. And I think that's a clever idea to have a backup plan. But hey, if it doesn't work, here we go, we still have a backup plan. So it's not a complete failure.
Yeah.
But you're right, yeah. Ideally, you don't want to have a method where it actually fails 5%, because if you think about it, 5%
is a lot.
Is a lot. Yeah, you don't want to have something in clinic where it fails 5% of the cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever approach that we eventually end up implementing, want to make sure that error is nowhere close to 5%. Actually.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting and really cool idea, and lots of other cool ideas that sort of flow from that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ever since we actually started this project, there's a lot of other ideas that are being thrown at us, and this has developed quite a bit actually. So for the past, I wanted to say 2 to 3 years now, at MIC or SNMMI, we've been actually reporting on the progress, and every step of the way, we've managed to reduce the error, the quantification error by a good margin.
Excellent. Oh, I'll be looking forward to seeing this as a product that's down the track that works effectively. Is it near being a product that people could buy or use?
I don't have an answer to that. What I can tell you is that we've been working with our collaborators around the globe to actually test this algorithm on patient data sets. Whether if this is ever going to be in a product or at one point really depends on the analysis and really depends on the feedback that we get from our collaborators. So I don't have a solid answer to that just yet.
Okay. It's a great idea, and I think it's a great approach. It's something that's super interesting. It's great to see people thinking out of the box, taking things out of the way. So that's
yeah.
Much appreciated. Anything else you'd like to add in terms of this?
Not really, no.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
thanks again for taking part in the podcast. That was super interesting and a really clever idea.
But thank you very much for having me.